Each and every one of the following duels, exchanges, and moments were mostly all unquestionably great, but they were one little alteration away from being utterly flawless. So I am Gareth, this is What Culture Star Wars, and here are 10 Star Wars moments one tweak away from perfection. Number 10. Erase Leia's memories of her mother. As Luke Skywalker and Leia Organa share a moment together on Endor during Episode 6, Return of the Jedi, the former eventually reveals that the latter is and always has been his sister. It's a lovely moment, if you forget about all those awkward smooches, and one that contains some of the original trilogy's most underrated dialogue, with Mark Hamill delivering the wonderful "The Force is strong in my family" speech. However, there's no getting away from the fact Leia's comments about her mother earlier in the exchange have aged rather terribly in the wake of the prequel trilogy's arrival at the start of the millennium. When asked if Organa remembered her own mom, Leia responds by explaining how she died when the princess was very young. But that and the fact Leia claims to remember how beautiful, kind, and sad her mother was makes very little sense after watching Padme Amidala suddenly bite the dust in the moments after the twins' birth in Episode 3, Revenge of the Sith. Now sure, this could just be Leia talking about a Force vision of her deceased mother, but that's never really been confirmed on screen, and the simplest way to improve this now quite perplexing scene would be to just erase Leia's apparent memories of Amidala altogether. Number 9. Take away the needless CGI stunts in the pulsating Anakin vs Obi-Wan duel on Mustafar. Without doubt one of the strongest lightsaber clashes of the entire Star Wars Skywalker saga, the emotional duel between Obi-Wan Kenobi and Anakin Skywalker is the prequel trilogy at its operatic best. And part of what makes this fight between former master and apprentice such a riveting watch even all these years later is just how physical and explosive the combat itself appears throughout the showdown, with Hayden Christensen and Ewan McGregor evidently throwing everything they have into the climactic scene of Episode 3, Revenge of the Sith. The one thing that stops this largely perfect sequence of breathtaking choreography from being entirely flawless, however, is George Lucas's penchant for pointless CGI additions. Both the digitally crafted moment Anakin throws himself across a Mustafar control room as he attempts to smack Kenobi with his iconic lightsaber, and the point towards the end of the duel when the pair hilariously soar through the air and land on the tiniest of objects floating in a river of lava, instantly pull you out of the otherwise spectacular action. Could each of those jarring acts not have been achieved through a bit of well-rehearsed wire work instead? Lucas certainly created some of the most jaw-dropping CGI visuals the galaxy had ever known during his prequel epics, but his reliance on the tool here unfortunately just took something away from the hard-hitting collision between two of the series' true icons. Now I've got a quick question for you. What's your favourite duel in all of Star Wars? Is it the Mustafar battle or something else? You let me know in the comment section down below. Number 8. Having Yoda actually speak normally during certain intense moments. Watching the little green legend known as Master Yoda soar down from the heavens to save the day in Episode 2, Attack of the Clones, alongside a whole army of clone troopers, more on them later, will never not be a magnificent visual. But that doesn't change the fact that this powerful Force user's arrival during the awesome first battle of Geonosis was almost immediately undermined by some typically dreadful George Lucas dialogue. Instead of having Yoda do the logical thing here and deliver orders that were as clear as possible to the troops, Lucas opted to have the Jedi say the baffling line of "around the survivors a perimeter create." It's not as though the Jedi, known for his delivery of wisdom such as "do or do not, there is no try," is completely incapable of speaking in a more understandable way either. He tells another clone trooper to concentrate all your fire on the nearest ship during that same battle a little later on. The arrival of the clone troops on the battlefield for the very first time is still a rather badass one, but it's a moment that could have been even stronger if Yoda hadn't decided to needlessly complicate this Jedi rescue with his signature awkward way with words. Number 7. Revealing that Chewbacca was legitimately killed. Episode 9, The Rise of Skywalker, ultimately went down in history as one of the safest and blandest big-budget blockbusters of the last decade. But there was a moment there when it actually looked like J.J. Abrams and co. had delivered one of the boldest and most tragic shocks of the entire Skywalker saga during this 2019 mess. As Rey and Kylo Ren wrestle via the Force over a transport seemingly containing Chewbacca, the former accidentally unleashes a few destructive bolts of Force lightning, exploding the ship out of the air air and inadvertently murdering everyone's favorite Wookiee. Right there and then, Rey realized just how dangerous her power could be, how close she was to the dark side. And the movie in general was gifted some actual stakes. For about 20 minutes, said emotional demise was then swiftly undone as soon as it became clear that Chewie wasn't on that transport at all. He was on another First Order ship, and would eventually be rescued by our Resistance heroes after his apparent death. Had Abrams and the gang had the guts to make Chewie's heartbreaking end a permanent and properly impactful one though, then perhaps the Rise of Skywalker wouldn't have turned out to be an entirely uninspiring experience. Number 6. Having Vader actually accidentally kill Padme. With the mother of Luke and Leia having no on-screen presence during the original trilogy, fans knew Padme Amidala likely wasn't making it out of Episode 3 Revenge of the Sith alive. However, the way the former Queen of Naboo ultimately passed away during that final prequel entry still sits as one of the most disappointing moments of the entire Skywalker saga. Though Anakin Skywalker does inadvertently cause his beloved's eventual death by taking a walk on the dark side and breaking her heart, the fact a strong-willed and fearless Amidala then simply lost the will to live shortly after coming face to face with and being briefly choked by a now Darth Vader, and giving birth to her twins was a bit of a dissatisfying end for the character. And while Vader being manipulated into thinking he did actually kill his wife by the Emperor definitely added another fascinating layer to that master-apprentice relationship, having a consumed by rage chosen one genuinely strike down a Padme trying to bring him back to the light on Mustafar would have been a far more heartbreaking and shocking end for the Senator. Luke and Leia could have perhaps then been brought into the world just before Amidala's body finally succumbed to her injuries too, and one of the worst deaths in Star Wars history would have thankfully been avoided. Oh yeah, and just a quick thank you for watching this video today. If you like what you see, then go and hit that subscribe button down below. Number 5. Chucking in a few practical pieces of armor during the various epic battles and clone moments. Returning to the clone troopers found teaming alongside and eventually turning on the Jedi Order throughout the Star Wars prequels now, it's become pretty common knowledge at this point that every single piece of clone armor seen on screen during this trilogy was entirely digital. And it's that fact that unfortunately results in many of the coolest clone moments these flicks have to offer looking ever so slightly cartoonish and jarring. Had Lucas and co decided to actually drop a few practical clone trooper outfits into everything from the epic moment the full clone army is shown on Coruscant at the end of Attack of the Clones, to those few times Tamura Morrison's face is shown sticking out of the armor though, the Republic's army would have unquestionably looked that little bit more impressive throughout the trilogy. The likes of Andor and Obi-Wan Kenobi eventually showed how having a few practical troopers firing their blasters at various foes very much helped the action feel that bit more authentic too. And if a similar approach was opted for during the creation of the prequels, perhaps some of those still largely enjoyable clone conversations and battles wouldn't have looked quite as unconvincing at times. Number 4. Making Boba Fett's death slightly less silly. While the most badass bounty hunter in the galaxy did eventually find a way to cheat death, of course, that still doesn't change the fact that this Beskar-wearing icon's initial quote-unquote death in Episode 6 Return of the Jedi was a hell of a letdown. After being recently unfrozen, Han Solo ultimately accidentally caused Boba Fett's unexpected death by swinging a stick at his jetpack, causing it to malfunction before he collided with Jabba's barge and tumbled right into the mouth of the Sarlacc. But surely having the recovering one-time smuggler or Luke Skywalker engage in an extended shootout/duel with the gun for hire instead would have been a more thrilling choice than this odd slapstick end. Even Lucas himself has since admitted that he'd have made Fett's death here slightly more exciting if he'd been fully aware of just how popular the character would become. And with that little Tatooine tweak, turning a silly fatality into an epic potential last stand for the bounty hunter, this exhilarating rescue scene would have been undoubtedly improved. Number 3. Jar Jar keeps his tongue in his mouth during the important dinner scene. Perhaps one of the most underrated and overlooked scenes to have gone down within the entire Skywalker saga can be found during Episode 1, The Phantom Menace. As Qui-Gon Jinn, Jar Jar Binks and Padme sit down for some grub with Anakin and Shmi Skywalker after trying to buy the parts they needed to fix their ship, the group engage in an interesting chat about slavery in the galaxy, pod racing and Jedi Knights. And it's during this crucial conversation when a young Annie eventually offers to help Jinn and his pals, subsequently changing both his own life and the galaxy history forever by entering the Bunta Eve pod race. It's just a shame then that most folks only remember this hugely important moment in Star Wars history as the scene that involves the aforementioned Gungan slapstick supporting character repeatedly and rather annoyingly firing his tongue at a bowl of food. Instead of being a much needed bit of comic relief, these goofy antics just end up becoming painfully distracting. And though Qui-Gon does manage to catch his pal's tongue relatively early on in the otherwise quite intriguing discussion, the damage had already been done. Put simply, this particular scene would have massively benefited from Lucas just knowing when to keep Jar Jar's mouth shut. Number 2, have the Masters drop their lightsabers during Sidious and Yoda's battle. There's a moment there during the long-awaited clash between the two strongest Force wielders in the galaxy, when Jedi Master Yoda and Darth Sidious attempt to pulverize the other, and much of the galactic Senate chamber, using only their skill with the Force. And it was magnificent. What was less wonderful to behold, however, was the prior few minutes of silly, flippy lightsaber dueling between the all-powerful rivals. It's not hard to see what Lucas was going for here. With Anakin and Obi-Wan engaging in a similar epic lightsaber showdown on Mustafar, the director clearly liked the idea of cutting between the two galaxy-changing laser sword clashes. But all this jumping between fast-paced lightsaber battles did was highlight how goofy and unserious the hugely cartoonish Yoda-Sidious duel felt in comparison to the much more grounded and emotional confrontation amidst the flames. And by just having both immensely powerful masters keep their blades holstered during their inevitable collision, and simply relying on their knowledge of the Force to take down their rival, fans could have been treated to more awesome stuff like the visual of Sidious launching half the Senate at his little green friend. The less flubber-like Yoda, the better too. Number 1, Maz actually explains how she got Anakin/Luke's lightsaber. The entire sequence involving the return of Anakin Skywalker's iconic lightsaber during Episode 7, The Force Awakens, is one of the more fascinating ones to tumble out of the sequels. After Rey discovers the sacred Jedi weapon in Maz Kanata's castle on Takodana, the scavenger experiences a startling vision. One that involves her witnessing everything from the day she was left on Jakku to the fall of Luke's Jedi Academy. Then, after refusing to have anything to do with that terrifying laser sword, and the First Order wiped out a few planets with their Starkiller-based superweapon, Maz appeared to be on the verge of revealing exactly how she came into possession of this legendary weapon as she handed it over to Finn, Han Solo, and Chewbacca. Only, instead of offering a simple and/or intriguing answer to that question, Maz just bafflingly breezes over that mystery, telling the group to take it and find Rey. And said question has still infuriatingly yet to be properly answered all these years later, with this increasingly pointless mystery sadly taking a bit of the shine off the return of such a legendary piece of Star Wars history. If J.J. Abrams had just resisted the urge to drop in this pointless tease and throw in a quick line explaining how Maz came across the unmistakable weapon, then this rather wonderful lightsaber reintroduction would have been without its one utterly frustrating flaw. Did you enjoy this Star Wars video? Well, if you did, then check out this 10 fascinating Star Wars facts that sound fake but will blow your mind video too then. Bye bye, and may the Force be with you.